Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to my Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building in the world of Myshuno, which is the world that we got from the expansion pack The Sims 4 City Living, and I'm going to be furnishing some New York inspired apartments. So I feel like I need to give you a tiny little bit of context behind this just before we get too far into the video, just because I don't want you to be confused and whatnot. But basically I'm not furnishing one apartment today. I decided that I wanted to furnish 3 separate apartments, and they just so happened to be apartments that I'd actually already previously built. Now, basically, if you've been here a while, you might remember, but a few weeks back, I decided to build almost like a miniature New York within the game. So I wanted to build something that was a kind of like a multi-purpose, multi-functional community lot that you could run as multiple different community lots within the game. You know, you could run it as a coffee shop, a bookshop, as well as a music store, which will be like retail within like the game's functions. And I decided that I wanted to make it for my save file. Now, when I originally built it, I was trying to recreate something that you might see in New York City. And, you know, when you think of New York, you think of tall buildings, skyscrapers, you know, the buildings in that city, they've got some height to them. And so I initially knew going into it was going to be quite a tall building. But then when I actually came in and I started furnishing it, I realised it was probably not the best idea to furnish the whole upstairs, because the lot that I built it on is one of them lots where you would load into a festival. So I've explained this before in like the previous video, but pretty much long story short, whenever you go to a festival within the game, your game won't load into the festival itself. It has to load into a community lot. And where I was making it for my save file, I didn't want the community lot for whenever your Sims go to a festival to be too heavy on your game, especially if you've got a lower end computer. And so pretty much the way that I designed this community lot was the whole downstairs portion was fully furnished. So, you know, you've got a coffee shop, a bookshop, a music shop, a library, whatnot. But then on the upstairs level, I decided to make some like partly furnished apartments. And what I mean by that is I went in and I did the initial floor plan. So that's why you haven't seen me do the floor plan. I originally did the floor plan when I initially built the actual building itself. And I like did the wallpapering, I did a bit of flooring, and then I only put in like core pieces of furniture. So, you know, for example, if you move flat or if you move into a new house, you're not going to pick up your toilet and put it in your suitcase, and you're not going to take your sink with you. They're going to be things that are going to be already within wherever you're moving to. And so I did it like partly furnished in that way. And then I mentioned in the initial video that if you'd like to see me like furnish the actual apartments and kind of see my take on it, then let me know and I'll be more than happy to do so. And pretty much a lot of you turned around and said that you'd actually like to see me furnish them. And so that is pretty much what I did, and it was so much fun because I decorated 3 completely different apartments from another. They all got their own individual styles, they've all got their own personalities and storylines, and they all kind of like intertwine with one another. So all of the Sims in all the different individual apartments kind of have some sort of relationship, or at least knowledge of the other residents. I don't know, I had a lot of fun doing it, so I hope you guys like it. But getting on and kind of giving you the apartment rundown. So like I said, there's 3 different apartments, all in completely different styles. First of all, I do want to mention this apartment that you're seeing me do right now, it ends up being a little bit gross, a bit manky. Don't worry, they're not all like this. So this one, I basically did this to be a bit of a studio apartment. To me personally, this felt very New York-y, because that's not what I'm describing one, but the amount of different films and TV shows that I've seen before in the past where there'll be someone that'll be living in a New York apartment, but the apartment is like a studio apartment, there isn't much space. And I mean, to be honest, this apartment ends up having quite a bit of space, but I wanted it to feel like a studio apartment that they didn't really have much room to work with. And so there is a small little room. You see the one that I've just tried to create like a fake little doorway with like an open door into? That could potentially be a bedroom if you want it to be. But for the Sim that I imagine to live here, which by the way, I imagine that an aspiring songwriter could live here, I imagine that they'd rather have like a little bit of a home office, a bit of a working space, a bit of a just basically a study, rather than having like a fully fleshed out bedroom. So you'll see when I move on to it, and I'm just basically the way that I did the lounge room, I've never done anything like it before, I don't think, but I basically separated the lounge room, so the lounge room is also kind of like the bedroom, but it's separated by a load of different bookcases. It looks so cool, like the screenshots of that room. But there is this one apartment which is kind of like a studio, then there is also another 2 apartments upstairs. Now one of them ended up being a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, and it's an actual bedroom, so it's not like this one where there's like a bookcase in the middle of the lounge room. It's an actual, there's a doorway and there is a door going to the bedroom, and I decorated that apartment to be for a set of elders, because I feel like I never decorate anything, or at least if I do, I don't do it as much, but I feel like I never do anything for elders in my storylines and in my builds. And so I felt like I felt like it would be a really nice idea to have an apartment just dedicated to a little elderly couple who just so happen to be the owners of this building. Now, I was thinking that they're the landlords. They own all 3 apartments and they also own 2 of the commercial shops downstairs. I was more so thinking they own the bookshop as well as the music store, not so much the cafe, because I was thinking that these elders were like sweet little elderly couple. I personally couldn't imagine them owning like the urban coffee shop downstairs, and so maybe they used to have it and then maybe like they sold the ownership of it or something. But then there is another one apartment which ended up being 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, and I decorated that one to be for 2 university students. That one is very girly. It is very bohemian styled. It's just, you know, the high school years expansion pack. I made as much use of that pack as I could possible in that build, like it's just, or in that apartment, because it's just filled with loads of different just bits and bobs that are just very bohemian, very girly, very like teenagery, but it's not for teenagers, it's for high school students. But to be honest, if you wanted to, you could probably have a set of like teenagers live in that apartment. But yeah, there is 2 university students as well living in this complex. But that was just kind of like the rundown of the whole entire, the building itself. But moving on and actually talking about what I'm doing right now. So as you can see, I've already done the kitchen for this apartment. Now I wanted it to feel as messy, as grungy, as just a bit minging. That's not really a good word to use, but it isn't the most clean and well kept apartment. Now, like I said, I imagined that this apartment could be for an aspiring songwriter, and I was also trying to think of the storylines of all the individual Sims, how they have kind of got into this place, how have they got into this apartment complex, and their kind of like little backstory. Now, for this Sim, I was personally imagining that they'd come from somewhere like Oasis Springs or StrangerVille, basically somewhere that is completely different from the city of San Myshuno, because in my head, and also in my gameplay, whenever I play the game myself, I basically try and envision San Myshuno to be a bit like New York City. Maybe that's why I initially built the complex in the first place, but I always like the idea of so many different Sims wanting to grow up and move to the city and have this really big dream career of theirs and, you know, be really famous or really popular. I say that. I don't often play with fame in my own personal gameplay, but you know, the idea of moving to New York City and pursuing your dream career. I always like to think of San Myshuno in my own personal gameplay like New York in that aspect. And so I was thinking, this Sim is originally from like a small town and they've always wanted to move it to the city to become a songwriter. Now the thing is, I was thinking that this Sim didn't really have any money, they didn't really have a job lined up for them, and they were probably just working like an average Joe job. They were probably working in like maybe like a shopping mall, or maybe like in a bank or a convenience store, just something that wasn't really what they wanted to do like full time. It was just more so a job so they could get a little bit of money to maybe save a bit of it and then put down a deposit on like a flat or something, or like a just a little bit of money behind them. It wasn't something that they basically wanted to pursue, and they were working in this career. And I was trying to figure out like, how could I get this Sim that lives in this small town, just works a regular average Joe job, to then move to the city and then somehow bag himself quite a decent sized apartment. And so I was really thinking about it, and then I came to the idea of, what about the possibility of this Sims, this songwriter's family, maybe just so happens to be friends with the landlords of the apartment, so the little elderly couple upstairs. Maybe this Sims, I don't know, dad or mum went to school with one of the landlords, or maybe they were like distant family friends. I don't know exactly how the relationship was formed, but the idea that I had in my head was basically the landlords, the little elderly couple, are distant family friends, or maybe close family friends to this songwriter Sim, and maybe they just so happen to know that they really wanted to move to the city, and maybe one of their previous tenants that used to live in this apartment just so happened to move out, and there was an opportunity as kind of like somewhere to live that isn't so hard on this Sims bank account, and so pretty much they decided to come and move in. Now they probably moved in with the little bit of money that they had probably saved up from their like banking job, or if they worked in like a convenience store or something, they probably had a little bit of money to put down on a deposit, and then they probably worked in, again, like an average Joe job in the city. Their kind of like savings was kind of like getting them through, and then I imagine that eventually, you know, the music shop downstairs, which is part of this like community lot complex, I imagine that there was a bit of an opening, and the previous like manager or like shop assistant had previously left, and so it was a perfect fit for this Sim to then go and work in the little music store downstairs. And it just kind of, it ties in nicely, because they want to be a songwriter, which I know isn't exactly like the end goal where this Sim would probably want to be, but I mean, you'd rather work work in a music shop if you want to be a songwriter than work in a bank, or at least I feel like if I wanted to write songs for a living, I'd rather work in a music store. But that was just kind of like the idea that I had for this sim. Now I imagine that they'd probably previously just moved out of like their parents' house. This is their first apartment in the city, you know, it's this really big new exciting thing, and so because of that they often have a lot of house parties, and that is part of the reason why this apartment is such a big mess. So that is the part of the reason why there is just stuff everywhere. Like there is cans, there is pizza boxes, there is rubbish next to the bin, hasn't been taken out. There is also, I don't know if you noticed, in the kitchen I put down a little like mouse hole thing, so a mouse should come out of it in gameplay. And I also placed down like a little, you know, in the city living apartments, if you ever play in them, where there's like a little mouse hole, and to try and catch the rat you can put down one of them little traps with like a little bit of cheese in it. I placed down one of them in the kitchen. I was also imagining that the majority of the furniture within the flat itself, maybe like some of the pieces, it came with the flat. When I say it was like part furnished, it was probably very partially furnished, so maybe like the odd chest of drawers and maybe the bed came with the flat. But in terms of like the sofa and like the desk and stuff like that, maybe they just found it on the side of the road, or maybe they popped down to the flea market and maybe they managed to get it from the flea market. And so that's why some of the furniture looks so out of place and looks so just rugged, and just it just works so perfectly. If you're wondering, the sofa that I use is from the Werewolves game pack, as well as the little recliner chair. It just worked perfectly for what I wanted in this apartment. But I was also imagining that where they throw so many different gatherings, I really like the idea of them possibly having some sort of relationship with the upstairs neighbours, so the university students, which is actually quite perfect the way that I timed that, because that wasn't even meant to be timed that way. But I've now moved on into their apartment, so this is the apartment for the 2 university students. Now I was imagining, going back to like the other storyline of the songwriter, I was thinking that maybe when these students first moved into their apartment, maybe they heard all the noise downstairs and they went to go and complain. You know sometimes in the Myshuno apartments, I don't know if it happens so much in the ones that we got from the Eco Lifestyle expansion pack, you know, the apartments in that world, because if I'm being completely honest, I don't often play in that world, so I'm not too familiar where, you know, like sometimes if your neighbours are being loud, you can go and bang on their door and stuff. Maybe they went and banged on the door and was saying like, look, keep the noise down, something like that, and maybe they became quite close friends. And I do really like the idea of one of the students in particular maybe forming some sort of like romantic interest in the neighbour downstairs. I feel like that is such a rom-com waiting to happen. I just really like that idea. But getting on and actually talking about this apartment, so you might notice this one happens to be quite squish, and you might have noticed that because you can see that I've started it and I've started furnishing the kitchen, which also kind of doubles up to be the hallway. So this apartment is the smallest one out of all the 3. You literally walk in through the front door, you're already in the kitchen, and then you walk through the archway. There's no like hallway like there is in the other apartments. You kind of walk into the lounge room, which is kind of the hallway, and then there is a separate bathroom and then the 2 bedrooms. But I just feel like it's so cozy and so wholesome. And tell you what, I had so much fun decorating this one, because I realised I've never really done like a teenager's apartment or like a teenager's tiny home, or something where I decorate a whole entire living space to like a certain life stage, which is a little bit more funsy, if you get what I mean. Like a teenager's going to have more fun stuff in their house rather than like a young adult. And so it was so much fun to decorate with all these different new items that we've got from the high school years expansion pack that I haven't really used that much yet, and just use all these different decorations, all these different plants. There is so many plants in the end in this apartment. It is just plant filled. There's loads of different posters on the walls. There is just so many different neon signs as well. It was just a lot of fun to decorate this apartment. But like the other apartment, I was also trying to think of the individual Sims that live here, their storylines, and also how they kind of managed to, again, bag himself this apartment in San Moschino. So I'm going to start off with the sim that I imagine had lived here their whole entire life. Not in this particular apartment, just in the city of San Moschino. So I imagine that there is one university student that has lived in San Moschino their whole entire life. Maybe their family lives, I don't know, in like the arts quarter or something like that. They've just always lived in the city, and to live in San Moschino isn't much of a big deal to them because they've always been around it. Now, I was personally thinking that this teenager, teenager. They're not a teenager, but I mean, you could have teenagers live here, but I was more so thinking that this student wanted to one day grow up and become a graphic designer, which I'm not sure if there is like a dedicated course your Sims can actually take when they go to university to become a graphic designer. I mean, from playing through university myself several times, I know that there's different types of courses your Sims can do, and there's like multiple different job opportunities at the end of them, or at least jobs that they could potentially go into. But I know that there is a freelance career, which is, I think it's like a digital artist, which in my head, pretty much graphic designer, innit? And so I was thinking that this Sim wanted to basically one day grow up and become a graphic designer, but in the process of doing that, and in the process of living in this apartment, where they're kind of like so used to the city, they're not too fussed about going out and exploring it, because this is pretty much like their childhood town. Like, this is their hometown. They're not too bothered about it. And so they ended up spending quite a lot of time playing games on their computer. And eventually they just decided, why don't I just start streaming this, like live streaming it, and just sharing my own personal like gameplay experiences and letting people watch me play throughout all these different games. And pretty much in the process of that, without even making it their intention, they somehow became quite a big streamer, and quite quickly. I could just picture this Sim just deciding to bunk off their university lectures, stay at home, stay in this apartment, and just, play games literally for like 12 hours a day, because it's something that they really enjoy doing, and it's something that they've been able to make quite a nice, like, good chunk of income from as well. And so I imagine that they're probably going to either think about the possibility of dropping out of university, or maybe they're gonna like, what is it called, like defer for a year, when you're like, all right, I'll come back a little bit later on, I've got some stuff that I want to do first. Maybe they're going to do that, I don't know. But I really like the idea of them becoming a streamer, because as well as not decorating like any teenagery apartments, I've said that this is like a teenagery apartment. It's not. It's like a university student's apartment, but I've decorated it like how I would decorate like teenagers' bedrooms, if you get what I mean. But I've never really decorated that much stuff for like a streamer or a content creator or anything like that, which, I don't know, I don't know why I'd never do that, but I thought it was quite fun and quite a fun idea for that particular Sim. And I was also thinking, how I have the different storylines like intertwined and how all the residents know each other? I was just thinking that this particular Sim, the one that is kind of like a resident of San Myshuno already, I imagine that the landlords upstairs just so happen to be their grandparents, and so that's how they managed to bag themselves this nice apartment. And then the other roommate, kind of like the other student, is just like their best mate that lives with them. But moving on and actually talking about the best friend, or like the second university student, I was imagining that this Sim has a completely different backstory, completely different like upbringing to what their housemate has. So their housemate has always been in San Myshuno. They've always grown up in a really well populated place. They've grown up in pretty much a city that doesn't go to sleep. Whereas I imagine that the university student that isn't from here is actually from Windenburg. They are from a very secluded place. I say that Windenburg is actually the biggest world that we've got in The Sims 4, but they're from somewhere that is probably, their house is probably out in the sticks. Like they probably live in like a tiny little cottage or like their family does, in the world of Windenburg, very secluded, and very much coming to San Myshuno is such a big thing for them. That's why I wanted to point out in like the storyline for the other Sim that it wasn't really a big deal that they live in this apartment because they're used to it, whereas their best mate, this is like the best thing since sliced bread to them, because they've literally lived in the middle of nowhere for the majority of their life. But I was thinking that this student from Windenburg wants to grow up and become a politician, and so they'll be doing it some sort of like university related degree to that. I imagine that they were really opinionated and they want to change the world. You'll see that we move on into their bedroom. I tried to make a reference to that because I placed down one of them little, like them protest signs that when you actually go around the world of San Myshuno, you'll find them different protests happening. I imagine that this Sim consistently participates in them. To be honest, probably organises them. She probably is the Sim behind all these different protests, but I imagine that she's very opinionated, very into her politics, and wants to one day grow up and become a politician. Now, I was thinking that she probably really enjoys things like art and music, probably goes to like the art gallery, and maybe often goes downstairs to the music store, and that is where there's kind of like a little bit more romance happening in terms of the residents in this building. Because how I said when these girls moved into this apartment building, they went and knocked on the door of their neighbour, asked them to keep the noise down, and then they kind of formed some sort of relationship, and then it kind of turned into something a little bit romantic for one of them. I was thinking that the Sim that is originally from Windenburg, maybe since then often pops down to the music store, One, because they've just got a general like of music, like they have an interest in different songs and records and stuff. But two, also just has a massive crush on the sim that also lives downstairs. Maybe they've been on a few dates, maybe they go to the coffee shop, which also happens to be downstairs as well. I mean, there's a lot happening on this community lot, but maybe they go into the coffee shop and maybe they have a few different dates. I was also thinking that this sim maybe worked as a barista. So saying that, maybe they don't want to go for a date at their workplace. So maybe they go to a different coffee shop and they have a few dates, or maybe they just go to the cinema, maybe they go and watch a film together or a movie or something. But that was just kind of like the general overview for these sims. But getting on and actually talking about what I'm doing right now and kind of like how I'm decorating this apartment. So this is the bedroom for the university student that wanted, I should say, be a graphic designer. So you'll see in a minute, I'm going to place down one of them little drawing tablets onto the desk, but you can see right now I'm actually just doing the desk space itself, and I wanted to give a little nod to the fact that they've become quite a good streamer in a sense. So you know how on YouTube, if you've reached 100,000 subscribers, oftentimes you'll get sent a plaque. I basically wanted to do the Sims version of that, but for Twitch, or like the Sims version of Twitch. So basically I found this plaque, which is from the Get to Work expansion pack, I'm pretty sure, and I wanted it to basically pretend to be like a YouTube plaque but for Twitch. I don't even know if Twitch does that kind of thing, but in my head it just went nicely with the storyline, and it also just helped kind of like give a little bit of a nod to the storyline that I'd created for these Sims. So I just basically placed down this plaque onto the top of the desk, but I wanted it to kind of like be leaning and not so much be hanging on the wall, because where it's a wall decoration, it will just automatically snap. So you would have noticed I basically drew a wall, and then using the tool mod I basically highlighted it and then used the gravity pull feature to basically rotate it a bit and then move it forward to make it look like it was like leaning on the desk, if that makes any sense. But in that room as well, I also put the bed right in the corner. It was so cozy in that room. That room is probably my favourite bedroom out of all of them. Saying that, I do really like this bedroom, which I've now moved on to. It's very pink, it's very girly, but I don't know, there was just something about decorating the bedroom where the bed was right in the corner. There was all of these like ivy and all these different hanging plants hanging down, all the different like kind of like bohemian curtains. It felt very cozy in there. But in there I used the new bed that we got from the high school years expansion pack and popped it into the corner. We also have the desk, which is again from the high school years expansion pack. I actually also use that desk in this room now, so you can see that I've used the same desk, but it's just in a different colour palette. So the colour palette for this bedroom, which is the student, which is from Windenburg, if you want to put it that way to remember him. But in this room I wanted it to be very light, very girly, and so you'll see the difference in like the decorations. So in the other room I use a lot of like purples and dark pinks and a lot of black in there, whereas in this room I tried to keep it like pink frilly curtains and like a pink bubble chair in the corner, and then like a yellow bedspread and lightly coloured furniture. It's just two completely different personalities and two completely different styles, but somehow these girls just happen to be best mates. But you can see that I'm just currently going around and just cluttering their room up, trying to figure out like what kind of posters that I want to use, what kind of wall decorations. I'm not gonna lie to you, I did actually have a little bit of difficulty when it came to like doing this whole entire room. At the start of the clip, you might notice when I first initially came into this bedroom, I was kind of deciding what type of bed I wanted to use, because initially I wasn't fully set on the fact of having two different university students with two completely different personalities in terms of like their styles, and so I was still debating on what I wanted to do. And also I wanted the layout of this room to be different from the other one, because I didn't want both the layouts to have the bed up against the window. And then when it came around to actually doing what else you can fit into this room, I did struggle a little bit. But I mean, it ended up having like a double bed, it's got the little armchair in the corner, the desk area, it's got a chest of drawers area, and it also ends up having an art easel. So I mean, there is lots of stuff for your Sims to do in this room, but I did struggle with it a little bit. But you can see that I'm just going around now and finishing this room up. I use this chest of drawers, which I don't think I've ever used before. I use a lot of items in this one particular apartment, which I don't often tend to go for, because like I said, I've never really decorated anything for like a teen focused apartment or house. And even though this isn't a teenager's apartment or house, it's a university student's house, but I feel like a teenager's style and a university style are quite close together, and so I was using so many different objects that I don't normally tend to use. But you can see now that I've just placed down the little art easel in the corner, and now I'm just finishing the room off by placing down these, they're kind of like paintings that lean up against one another. We got them from the Eco Lifestyle expansion pack. But basically I wanted them to place down onto the board, but they were kind of like clipping a little bit. So again, just using the tool mod and the gravity pull feature, I basically highlighted them and then pulled them away ever so slightly. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the last apartment. So this is the third and final apartment, and this is going to be the apartment for the landlords of the whole entire building, and also just the elderly couple's apartment. So first things first, came into this one and I really didn't like the original placement of what I put the bathroom to be, because, okay, in all fairness, if this would have been like the university student's apartment or the other, like the I was about to say the storyteller, the songwriter's apartment, the bathroom would have been alright. But the thing is, I was thinking of, it's going to be an elderly couple's apartment and they've got a tiny little bathroom. They're also the landlords of this whole entire thing. Why would they happen to have the smallest bathroom and also happen to have the one that has one of them like freestanding showers? It's an elderly couple. I couldn't think. I just felt really bad basically giving the elderly couple a standing shower. A tiny little bathroom and a standing shower. And so I basically came into this one and I was like, right, no, that needs to change. And so I changed out the bathroom to then become kind of like a little bit of an add-on into the bedroom. It ends up being like a little bit of a dressing room for the elderly lady of this apartment. And then the kind of like the second bedroom, initially I was going to make it to be a bit of a previous child's room, so maybe their child that previously used to live in this apartment with them, it was their bedroom and they kind of like grew up and then moved out. But then I made that into the bathroom just because I wanted to give them a bathtub. I couldn't fit, I felt really bad just making them stand up for a shower, and so I changed the layout of this one particular apartment. I didn't do it for any of the others. It was just because I wanted them to have the option to, if they wanted to have a bath, they can, they can have a bath if they wanted to. And also I'm pretty sure, and I don't really play with elders too much in my game, and if I do, they're normally like the grandparents. That sounds really bad, but I'm not too much focused on them, and so I don't really pay that much attention to them, which sounds dreadful, doesn't it? But I'm pretty sure there is like a moodlet that elders get if they've been doing too much activity. It's kind of like an uncomfortable moodlet. Am I remembering that correctly? Like if you get them to go running and then go to the gym, they have like this uncomfortable moodlet, like I need to sit down, because I mean, bless them. Bless their little hearts. But anyway, this is the landlord's apartment. Well, I mean, I say landlords, it's kind of like, it's just an elderly couple. I don't imagine him to be like a landlord that's, my rent is due, where's my rent? Like, I don't imagine them to be them kind of landlords. I imagine them to be the most sweet, genuine and just kind little elderly couple, and they just so happen to own the whole entire apartment block apart from the coffee shop downstairs. Now I imagine that in the daytime, I'm going to say granddad, because technically they are the grandparents to one of the residents that live downstairs, but I imagine that the old man, if I want to put it that way, is spending their time downstairs in the bookshop. If you'd watched my previous video, it's a very cluttered up bookshop. Like, it is just got everything and anything. There is so many different books in there. Pretty much every single book that I could find in the debug menu is in the bookshop downstairs. But I imagine that they spend the majority of their time downstairs in the little bookshop, and they still run it. It's been their business. Maybe it's been like a family business, and it's been in their family for a good few years now, and they like to spend their days downstairs. They don't even have to. They probably have got so much money from like the rent from all the different tenants, as well as just kind of like the rent from the bookshop and the music store. They probably don't need to, but it's probably more so something that they do to kind of like fill out their days and kind of, I don't want to say still give them a purpose, but do you know what I mean? Like, it keeps them busy and they like it. But I imagine the little old lady, or kind of like the wife to the old man, is someone that probably has never really worked for either like the music store or maybe like even the bookshop. Maybe like they occasionally run downstairs and give the customers a cup of tea or something like that. But I imagine that the couple met when they were really young, and maybe the whole entire building itself was something that had run in her husband's family, and so they got married. She didn't really have to work because her money was kind of already coming in for her from her husband's side. And so I just picture her to be this really well-dressed little old lady, like consistently dressed up, always got her nails done, always got her hair done, probably always has her hair like really short and curly, and she's just the most sweet and caring and just innocent little sim. I just imagine her to be kind of like the neighbourhood's grandma, even though she is literally someone's grandma downstairs. But I imagine her to be kind of like that person or that sim that your sims can go to, and they'll always give them really good words of advice, has so much wisdom, and just is kind of like an all-round really sweet sim. I also imagine that they bake a lot. I mean, I didn't put anything in the apartment to kind of reference this, but maybe they often participate in like the Finchwick Fair, and maybe they like to bake like different types of pies, and maybe they want to do like the baking baking competition. I'm pretty sure there's a baking competition. I'm pretty sure there is like a pie contest or something like that. Maybe they participate in that every once in a blue moon. I don't know. I just imagine them to be a really sweet little elder that likes baking and also really likes knitting. I don't know if that's too stereotypical, but it's what I'm going to go for. But you can see anyway that I've already done their kitchen for the apartment, and now I've moved on into their bathroom. Now the bathroom actually ends up being quite big. Like I said, originally that was going to be, I say that, I'm still on it. Originally this was going to be a bedroom, but I would just rather them have an actual I just feel bad making elders stand up and have a shower. I'm much happier that they've got a nice big bathroom. They've got a shower and bath combo. I use the one that we got from the Vampires game pack because it's very like older style, it's very like traditional looking, and I feel like whenever I do grandparents' houses or apartments, I more so go towards the chain toilet that we also got from the Vampires game pack, as well as that shower and bath combo. But now, as you can see, I've now moved on into the lounge room. So one thing that I wanted to point out is I had a lot of struggles trying to pick out what kind of rug I wanted to use for this room, and something that you might notice, which is actually a really good tip if you ever have the same kind of thing as me. I can never choose what kind of rug I want to go for, and to be honest, a lot of the time I'll put my hands up, I do use the same rugs because I know what I like and I like what I know, basically. But sometimes I forget all the different swatches of the rugs that we've got in the game, so you might have noticed that basically when it came around to picking a rug for this little kind of like lounging space, instead of just going through the individual rugs and trying to pick out the swatches, something that I did is on the right hand side, you know when you've got the different filters for all the different objects in the game, pretty much if you go into the colours option and you select every single colour, it will basically expand the whole entire menu to every single colour swatch of every single item. I did it for the rugs category, and then that way you can see all the different individual swatches behind all the individual rugs, because the thing is we've got so many rugs now in this game, like it's actually, we've got a lot. I don't feel like we need any more rugs. Still don't actually take that literally, Sim. I would really appreciate some more rugs because you can never really have enough, but there is so many, and there's so many hidden behind so many different swatches that you wouldn't even think were there. Like at some points there is different rugs that might be as in like a 2x3 rug, and it might be rectangle. You go through the swatches and then suddenly the rug seems to like change shapes and sizes and then becomes like a circular rug. Like there is so many different rugs in the game, and so I always get a little bit overwhelmed by it. So if you ever run into the same situation as me, just go into the like little category menu on the right hand side, filter by every single colour, and then that way you can't miss any rug in the game, because pretty much every single type of rug that is in The Sims 4 will show up in your catalogue somehow. But the thing is that I then run into with doing this, I narrowed it down so much that I had like 5, I think it was, different rugs that I was trying to like just basically choose between, because where I'd seen every single rug, I basically chose every single rug that I found. How many times have I said rug in the past 2 minutes? Either way, I was looking at all the different ones and I was trying to figure out which one ended up going the best with the sofas. I ended up choosing one that we got from the Cats and Dogs expansion pack. And by the way, the sofas, if you're wondering, the big 3-seater one is from the Cottage Living expansion pack. It's kind of like the Chesterfield one. And then we also got the 2-seater one, which has got quite a high back. That is from Cats and Dogs. And then the armchair is kind of like a matching set to that. I did also debate for a while what colour swatches I wanted them to be, because I didn't want it to be too matchy, but then I didn't want it to be so like bizarre that I've got a completely different armchair in terms of like the colour palette towards the sofa. And so it took me a while to decide on a few different things actually within this whole entire build, but I eventually just ended up pairing the sofas in like a red swatch, a brown swatch, and then like a little black swatch for the armchair. And then over here as well in this room, it also ended up being kind of like the dining room space, as well as a little bit of like an activity area. So over here you can see that I placed down like a dining room table. There is 4 seats because I was thinking that maybe possibly this elderly couple maybe invite the university students. Remember, one of them is their granddaughter. Maybe they invite their granddaughter and her housemate sometimes to come and have some dinner. I feel like they're them kind of Sims. Like they would just cook so much food for so many different people all around this neighbourhood in San Myshuno. They're really wholesome. But as well in this room, you can see I've placed down a bookcase, a little kind of like collection of potted plants, and then there is also kind of like a makeshift smaller piano. Now I have done this so many different times in so many different previous videos, but just in case you've never seen any of my videos before, or you've just never seemed to have catched the video where I've done this before, basically, there is only 2 objects that your Sims can learn the piano skill from. There is the absolutely massive grand piano, and then there is also the keyboard. Both basically the exact same object, just in different, they just have different looks towards them. But the thing is, sometimes a grand piano just doesn't really fit in. In all fairness, actually saying that, if there is one apartment that a grand piano would possibly fit in, it's probably the apartment for Sims that own a music store. But I just didn't want to place down the grand piano. It's too big. It would have taken up the whole entire lounge space. I wouldn't have been able to have a dining room table, and the keyboard is just a little bit too modern. So basically there's this trick. If you get 2 side tables, doesn't have to be a particular one, but basically you get 2 side tables, you turn them around, you kind of got the back of them, and then you like edge one up, you move one up so one is a little bit higher. You can basically merge in the keyboard into the side table, and it looks like a little tiny piano, and it works perfectly. Absolutely, it works 100%, playtest and everything, and yeah, it's just kind of like a nice little trick. But now, as you can see, I've moved on into the last room, which is the elderly couple's bedroom. So in here, I decided to go for the bed, which is from Discover University in this Fred swatch. There also ends up being like a little chest of drawers opposite it, which is from Cottage Living, and there is also like a little box full of like knitting stuff and like a plant in the corner and a mirror in the corner. And then just off their bedroom, I decorate kind of like a little dressing room for the elderly lady who is very high maintenance. Like I said, always got her nails done, always got her hair done, and I wanted to kind of give her her own little space to make herself presentable for the day. But I'm just going to go around this room and finish it off, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My origin ID is JessicapieYT, or you can search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content, then please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speed building video. Bye guys.